Welcome everyone to episode 13 of the Isphere. We're very delighted with our new look. We're absolutely chuffed to bits, and now we can start formally. We've got a bunch of stuff that we're talking about today. We're going to be talking a wee bit about the world of publishing, as you would expect. We can't not talk about publishing.
We can't not.
So that's one thing we're going to cover, and you know that we're going to be talking about various shows. Lord of the Rings was mentioned before we started there, and we're also going to be talking about the wonderful new book written by.
Right, trigger warning. We will be talking about J.K. Rowling today.
Sorry in
sorry in
advance.
The numbers just drop on the viewing.
sorry in advance. We're going to be talking about J.K. Rowling. Joy. But no, I think that's cool. So, Joy, what's been happening in the publishing world? You sent me a little bit about it, but I did. Quite understand.
I'm gonna re-grab that link real quick because I can't remember the statistics now. But there was a tweet going around that was really, really fascinating, and it was about how the publishing, it basically is constantly making a loss at the minute. So the thread is on Twitter. If anyone wants it, I'll probably be posting it on my Tumblr later. I've already retweeted it, and it was it's to do with the Penguin House acquisition lawsuit that's going through. And they revealed that out of 58,000 trade titles published over the last year, most of them have sold less than a dozen copies. 58,000 books that they have put out into the world, and most of them have sold less than a dozen.
Like full-on print runs and everything?
Yeah. So it's 90% of the titles sell fewer than 2,000 units. And that is insane. That is absolutely bonkers to me as someone who is an indie self-pub. I've sold more copies than some New York Times bestsellers. That is insane to me, because it's just the whole again, here's the tweet from the New York Times. About 98% of the books that publishers released in 2020 sold fewer than 5,000 copies. So they've sold thousands upon thousands, and they've released thousands and thousands upon books, but they're getting very few sales. And the numbers are insane. It is absolutely mind-boggling that it is so bad for the mainstream industry right now, and I have views on why that is, but it's just for posterity's sake. Me as an indie author, I literally had a conversation last night with someone who is traditionally published, and they made the comment that I should try and legitimize myself by going trad pub. If I went trad pub with those numbers that they are currently projecting, I would lose about 99% of my income.
Oh, great.
So it is insane. It is absolutely kind of like, oh yeah, legitimize yourself through trad publishing.
And is there a standard?
Why?
Yeah. And is
at this point, why?
And is there a standard, like, I know that it tends to vary, but is there like a standard print run for Penguin where they would go, right, new book, we're going to print 10,000 copies, or would it vary from author to author?
It varies from your predicted popularity, and that is another part of it as well. A lot of them, they put money behind what they predict will be successful. So a lot of the time with trad pub, you are not necessarily successful because you are good, but because the industry has put money behind you.
So is this?
This is another industry secret that if you see a red sniper dot on running, it's they found me. But
So is the whole industry, like, I mean, it sounds like some of the other things we've talked about before, but it's like, is the whole industry just built on sand effectively, and basically there's a bunch of people who've continually backed all the wrong horses, and that's why they're not selling?
Yeah, it's more they don't back anybody new. They're not willing to take any risks. So they're backing the same people who consistently sell well, and then they put some money behind newer people, but not a lot. And there's more money goes into the advertising and the branding than there is actual promotion of sales and other stuff. Like, it's more also a case of the people at the top get more money than they really should be for the amount of work that they're doing. It's the So I just saw Hadif's comment there. I'd love to hear Joy's thoughts on what makes TradPub difficult because I'm currently writing something that I want to publish somehow, but I have no idea how to even start and where to go, the best channels to go. Yeah. Oh, you were the one that asked about how to create hype. Okay. The TradPub is difficult for several reasons. One of which, for me personally, is the lack of accessibility that comes with traditional publishing. And just so that if there's anyone new here who's not aware, I did work in traditional publishing. I worked on the inside of the industry for a good number of years. I am very much aware of how the system works. And it was part of the reason I chose to indie self-pub, because I didn't want to be part of that rat race. I know I have several friends who are very happy with their traditional publishing. They're happy with not having to do certain levels of work that you do have to do as an indie pub. But for trad publishing, I knew for myself personally, I would not be able to keep to the mandatory schedules that publishers put you under because my health fluctuates. And you don't have the same level of freedom, and you also lose creative control. And I did initially shop my book around when back in the early days. I did shop it around to see if anyone would be interested. And the major feedback I got, including from the publisher I used to work for, was the disability arc needs to go. You need to tone down the politics, and also you need to have the love triangle be more conflicted to get people's interest. That was everything that they told me would have.
So basically, yeah, I was gonna say everything that makes Hunger Pangs what it is, please remove it. Yeah, that's great.
Yes,
but
please make it more appealable to the mainstream. And my argument was, well, the mainstream is already saturated. I'm trying to do something for a neglected audience, which is myself. I am a neglected demographic in certain genres, in most genres actually. And
also, their points don't even carry weight anymore though, because if that's the numbers that are being if that's the numbers that they're getting, then why would you want to appeal to the mainstream as they put it? Because nobody's buying it. Barely any by percentage of people who buy books, nobody's buying it.
Yeah, exactly. And it was I didn't really, until I saw that tweet earlier, I never really had the vindication to turn around and say I have the feeling that I am doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of trad pub people, they look at why certainly for the person I was talking to last night, who shall remain nameless, their view of it was, well, you have such a good product, why wouldn't you make it mainstream? Because the mainstream doesn't want it, is the answer. It's very you're very much aware when you are part of a minority group that you are not wanted by the mainstream. This applies to being queer, LGBT, disabled, or racism or anything like that. You are made very clear that you are a novelty within the mainstream, and they tell you this is probably not going to sell well. Well, looking at the tweets that I've been reading out and the reports that are coming out of the Penguin thing, I'm going, well, I just outsold most major mainstream pubs by about 10,000 copies. So
yeah.
Why would I need to why am I having to legitimize myself to go through TradPub if I am literally doing better than TradPub? And I know I'm unique. I know I have the advantage of my Tumblr audience and everything else, but it just makes no sense. It makes no sense to try and say, well, TradPub is legitimate if this is the type of sales numbers that TradPub is now getting. So
yeah, and it gets weirder when we're talking about New York Times bestsellers.
Yeah,
because if the the equivalent is selling 5,000 copies is your New York Times bestseller material, that seems to be a big surely that should be bigger news. Really,
well, it's 5,000 copies in release week is what they aim for with New York Times.
Okay.
And the thing is, you can get most of that with good advertising, because a lot of New York Times bestsellers, New York Times bestsellers is an editorial. It is paid for by publishers. It is not actually based on. It's not an actual popularity contest. You actually get a better idea of what is popular by looking at US Today bestseller list.
Yeah. And I'm guessing there will be people out there who just buy off the list.
They do.
The New York Times bestseller list comes out and they just go, right, I'm going to grab that.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that are happy to be led by the editorials, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with wanting to read what's popular in the mainstream or what is up and coming. And there are some people that do break into it that are wonderful. There are some people that completely come out of nowhere and they just barrel past everything. But I don't think people realize how much of publishing is orchestrated,
Yeah.
and how much is dictated on based on how much money publishers are willing to spend. And the fact that the publishing is increasingly becoming more and more of a monopoly is a huge problem. Um, and it's just kind of, it's really disheartening, actually. It's really, there used to be so many small independent publishers that had a good reputation, that could get books out there that would become bestsellers, and now it's pretty much, you have to be one of the top 5 about to become top 4 publishers to get any traction. But at the same time, they are reporting record losses. They are reporting that out of the 58,000 titles that they put out in 2020, they sold about a dozen each.
That, I mean, my mind immediately goes to, what a fucking waste of paper.
It is.
Like Jesus, that is nuts. Like, I wonder how many of, like, if they're selling under 12, I wonder what the print runs on each of them were like. You could tell that, like, print run is a word that I know, an industry term I know. It's the
Yes.
only one I know, so I can now use it to my heart's content. But yeah, that seems pretty nuts. And what is it? So Penguin is getting acquired. Is that what it is?
I think Penguin and Schulster are merging into
Merging.
an even bigger conglomeration than they already are. Um,
Eesh.
and it's not good. It's not good. Because it also means that it's less chance of diversity, because the publishers have less reason to compete with each other, and it's more of the same yes men circles of, what do you mean we need more X, Y, Z? We already
Yeah.
have one person that represents this entire minority.
I just like, it's interesting the feedback that you specifically got about Hunger Pangs though, because like, um, it seems to be like dull the edges of the bits that are in, like, that are um not normally written about. So the politics
Yeah.
and the disability arc. But then have the most like cliched forced romance conflict that's pretty
Yeah, which
much in
is
every other, like, it can't be polyamorous. There's got to be a winner,
which is hilarious, because the whole reason I started writing it was a satirical commentary. The whole purpose of Fangs came from a shitpost where I was ridiculing that.
Yeah.
So for them to turn around and go, well, we need this to make it, appealing. I'm going, but there's a huge market. There's a market for people who don't want that. There's a market for people who want healthy polyamory that doesn't start out with that level of conflict. And I won't spoil it, but the entire way the trio gets together is a complete send up of that trope. And I am really, there's going to be so many people that are angry about it until they realize what I'm doing. Like, they're actually going to be quite angry with me, I think, and then they're going to flip a page and go, oh. But it was just, I specifically started writing Fangs because when I worked in publishing, I did a lot of the romance, and a lot of anything to do with bisexual romance as well. A lot of it was centered around love triangles and conflict and jealousy, and none of them ever evolved into anything resembling healthy polyamory. It was always, even if they did dabble with that sort of, relationship format, it always came down to the one true pairing survives, either because one of them turns out to be a villain, or because one of them dies. And that was when I was editing in, the 2010s and all that. That was incredibly common, and it was incredibly disheartening. It was so, just absolutely heartbreaking to see so many good things pulled apart, because it's, well, people actually want the one true pairing. Well, no, some of us want the OT3, some of us want the OT4, some of us actually want healthy representation of different relationship formats.
Hmm.
And the fact that I'm saying I tried to do that, I did do that. The fact that then they turn and goes, well, you need more conflict. You need this to be a certain way, otherwise it wouldn't have any appeal. It's just like, you're not listening.
I'm kind of
Not
getting
listening.
I'm kind of getting the feeling, like, of all of the TV shows and all of the books and everything that I've ever, I'm now getting this completely different view where, like, there's just been producers or editors being like, please up the drama, please have, like, really unnecessary drama in here. And that's like where you get a lot of the kind of, like, the shittiest plot points in, like, TV in particular. Like, there's so many, like, from someone telling you to up the drama, like obviously
Yeah.
as a skilled author you would have went and actually made it plausible, but I imagine that there's also a certain portion of people who go, you want drama, and then they just chuck the most cliched shit together.
Yeah.
um
There
yeah.
was just thinking about it actually. I can't name it because I'm under an NDA, but there was a book I helped edit in 2013 that wonderful premise for polyamory, absolutely wonderful representation, and the publisher forced changes on it that made it into a one true pairing at the end for mainstream appeal.
Mm.
And it was heartbreaking because the author agreed to it. And I remember sitting, I worked with them, I edited with them, and I said, you don't have to do this. You could take this independent. You could actually make a story that would really resonate with people. And their response was, but I need to make money and I need to have a career. So they were just going to do what the publisher told them to do. And I worked for a mid-sized publisher. I wasn't one of the big five, but I worked for a fairly, well-known publisher in the UK at the time, and it it was just really disheartening to see that happen, that the person was literally going, well, I can't afford to take that chance.
Mm.
And to be honest, that's another reason I just decided that I would, after I heard the feedback and everything else, I had this kind of out of body experience where I was sitting there going, I remember this. And I also remember that book failed. I remember that the people got really excited and really happy, and then the reviews were awful because it was more of the same cliches. It sets up really well, and then it just falls apart. And I remember looking at that, and I remember having that when they were telling me the exact same thing, and I thought, no, fuck you. I'm doing my own
Yeah.
thing. I'm maintaining the integrity of what I'm trying to do. And also the money they offered me to make all those changes was about a tenth of what I ended up making.
Right.
And they would have kept more in royalty. Like my
Yeah.
royalties would have been less as well because of what the deal that they offered me. And I'm really glad that I did what I did, and I'm staying independent because I it's very aware to me that I cannot tell the stories I want to tell within the mainstream, the way the mainstream is at the moment. There are some people that are trying to change it. There are some fantastic people that are making changes to the industry, but it's not happening fast enough. And
Mm.
also, how it's so rare that people actually get made allowances for and that things actually go through. Um,
Yeah, so like
it's
there's this
yeah,
kind of like mass industry, like just it's almost like amalgamating all stories into like a very one note.
it's a
Like
formula. It's
it's
they have
formulaic,
figured
yeah.
it. There is a formula for writing stories. There are certain beats you need to hit for different types of genres. Like romance has its own beats. Crime has its own beats. You do need to hit those beats consistently.
Hmm.
You can alter the structure in which the beats are hit, but there's a
Yeah.
complete resistance within the industry to alter the structure because they know, if you follow X, Y, Z, you get a story at the end of it. But if you do, X, Z, Y, they're going to go, oh, well, that's a little bit risky. We don't want to deal with that. Doesn't matter if you're still hitting all of the beats, which to me are
Mm.
honestly the more important parts of what you're trying to do. Um,
It's weird
they
though, because
still,
like as a
yeah,
as a reader, like sure, like if you read a lot, you'll be able to spot the formulas like a mile off.
yeah.
And I can imagine that leads to like obviously like books can have space for like their own twists and turns, but like when you reduce it down to a formula, it can kind of pull you out of
It can
what
be
you're
very
reading.
samey.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be
Like
very jarring to realize you're just being your job as the
yeah.
author is to lead people down the garden path, but you have to populate it with enough interesting things that the journey is enjoyable and not just here's a trudge, here's how, make X go to Y, you know.
Yeah.
Um
I
and
think that
it does get tiring. It gets tiring reading it and it also gets tiring writing it, you know?
yeah. It's weird because like I can kind of see the resemblance to some stories in like video games as well, where
Yeah.
like you'll play two the same game, same stories, same beats, and like really all you're doing at this point is swapping out names for things, because there's nothing else really being added to the story. And I suppose like the job as an editor is actually to obviously get rid of some of the unnecessary bits, but not remove the core.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a shame because it's probably a good sideline into our next topic. Why doesn't J.K. Rowling's editors just tell her to stop everything? Ideally,
The same reason Anne Rice's editors never told her to say anything. It's just, which is another person that I was lampooning last week, and some people got angry at me. But as a professional editor and author, I don't give a fuck. I will absolutely go after people that are behaving badly in the industry.
who's Anne Rice?
The Interview with a Vampire Author, who also did
Right.
the I've been sporking the Sleeping Beauty erotica that she did back in the late 80s and early 90s, and it's awful. It's truly awful. But I can't believe I'm sorry. I'm just stunned that you had to ask me who Anne Rice is.
No, I know. Apparently,
I'm just having an internal
chat is
crisis
equally.
right now.
I'm sorry. What? Like, who the hell is this?
Anne Rice was huge. She's the reason vampires became really, really popular. She was the twilight of her day, and I say that with hesitancy because the fandom may actually come for me. But she was also notorious in fandom spaces because she was one of the big authors that went after people writing fanfic and tried to sue them, and she got fanfic archives shut down. That person, you've seen me complaining fairly often on Tumblr, I'm sure.
Sorry, I'm looking her up on Wikipedia right now, and she has Sleeping Beauty under the pseudonym A.N. Rogalor.
Yes.
I'm guessing that's the one that everyone's talking about in the comments.
Yes. The horrific one that is not very good.
Okay, dare I ask what's wrong with it?
It is boring.
Okay,
I don't even take issue with some of the more problematic things that are in it as an erotica story. Like there are things that I, as a person who worked on the industry as an erotica, I was a kink safety specialist for a number of years. And there are some things that if I'm editing things, it's mostly so that publishers don't get sued when people recreate them. Like it was a whole thing with 50 Shades, people were using zip ties as a form of bondage, which don't do that. Don't, please, if you are listening to this or watching this, please do not use zip ties as part of your sex life. Zip ties are awful. They can cut off circulation and they're very hard to get off without injuring, so don't use those. But that was a huge thing after 50 Shades of Grey because the character uses zip ties and people were getting injured. So my job was to basically go through a lot of things and go, don't say this, we'll change it to this, we'll do this because this is safe, this is not body safe, this will cause injury. It's basically mitigating the publisher from getting sued.
I would love to see your CV and it's got kink safety specialist. like that is an amazing title.
It depends on where I'm applying to. It doesn't always make it on there. But I literally got my training was I got to spend time with a dominatrix and talking to her about all of her safety stuff, and like I did like kink safety sex courses and everything else, and it was quite funny to me because there were, no one wanted that job in the office. Everyone was like, I don't really want it, and I also specifically worked with the queer romance stuff, and nobody wanted that job when it came up. I was going, I'll do it, and it was like, okay, there you go, you can work with the weird stuff, and I'm like, cool, I get paid to go to a kink convention for the weekend to learn about rope safety. Fantastic, living my best life.
To be fair, that actually sounds class. Like I'm not like there'll be people who are laughing about that. That sounds class. Like just use like anthropologist of the kink community. You go in there. I'm going to go to the lecture on rope safety. That's cool.
I mean,
that is very cool.
It was a scene that I was tangentially part of anyway. Like I did a lot of burlesque stuff and I did some aerial stuff as well before my body gave out on me. But it was a scene that I was always interested in, and I think that's evident when you read my work. But it was a really fun time in my life. I really enjoyed that, and but it was mostly the publisher was being I was basically there to avoid them from having anyone suing them because somebody injured themselves by following something that their books had said. This is not to say that every author is beholden to that. This is just my experience with it, and it's what I try to emulate going forward with my work and books that I work on. And the Anne Rice stuff is terrible. It's really, there's a lot of unsafe stuff in it, but I think, for some people it's complete suspension of disbelief. It's not supposed to be realistic in the slightest. My argument for that would be, cool, you can do that, but you need to build your world so that matters. You can say, well, it's just erotica, it doesn't matter. There are fabulous erotica stories that have so much depth to them that you're going, yeah, it is just a story for enjoyment and porn and smuttiness, but that's no reason to be lazy with it. And that's fundamentally what Anne Rice did with her books, that she was just lazy. And it's so hard to make erotica boring. Even if it's bad, it should at least be fun. But the claiming beauty stuff, I mostly just sit there with my head in my hands going, I'm bored. Like, I've never been bored reading erotica, and I'm bored of Anne Rice's. And that's my biggest complaint with it, is that it's dull and repetitive and completely unsexy. Like, nipples get referred to as nodules, and it's like, and there was also a classic line that I
like she's a system in a power plant.
Exactly. But it was one comment was, Sleeping Beauty is eyeing another enslaved prince, which, cause, by the way, they're all enslaved in this weird sex cult.
Yeah, I'm reading at the moment. I've got the blurb in front of me from Wikipedia. In the first chapter of the story, Beauty is awakened from her 100-year sleep by the prince, not with a kiss but through copulation, initiating her in a Satyricon-like world of sexual adventures. After stripping her naked, he takes her to his kingdom, ruled by his mother, Queen Eleanor, where Beauty is trained as a slave and a plaything. The rest of the naked slave, dozens of them in the Queen's castle, are princes and princesses sent by the royal parents from the surrounding kingdoms as tributes. What sort of world is this?
Very dystopian one, but
It's like, why?
There are very, some people really enjoy that, the idea of, they enjoy the idea of being a sexual submissive slave. That is a very valid kink. We're not shaming anybody for having that. I'm not, at least. I can shame if I want.
Fucking crack on.
But the thing is, it's so hard to make that dynamic boring, and yet it is boring. There are, there are other books that do that sort of dynamic really well. They are not necessarily, they're not done as much anymore because they are seen as problematic, which I think is a shame because, fantasy's fantasy, crack on, as I says. But the problem I have with Anne Rice's stuff is that there is no effort put into any of it. Like, you could turn and say, well, of course the slaves are able to withstand the massive amounts of paddling and spank. Like, literally, there is not a single page without paddling or spanking on it.
Oh.
And there's not a single mention of, like, oh, the one rule is that they never draw blood. And I'm going, at this point, I'm not worried about blood. I'm worried about internal injuries.
Like, I mean, this is the thing. Surely, if it's happening on every single page, then, like, it's not even really erotica at that point. Because, like, I mean, don't know about anyone else, but surely the build-up matters a wee bit. You can't just, like, be cutting that.
A huge part of it is tension. A huge part of building good erotica is tension, and there's zero tension. There's just somebody gets smacked, somebody cries, someone feels humiliated, but there's no tension behind it. Therefore, it's not well written. Yeah. And a huge part of that is that after the Queen of the Damned was written, Anne Rice was big enough that she could turn around and tell her publisher she didn't want her editor's input anymore. And they said yes.
Oh dear.
So nothing has been edited after that, apart from maybe a couple of proofreads for spelling and grammar. Nothing was allowed to be changed. There were no suggestions made because anything else was too much for Anne Rice's creative process to handle. And I'm sorry, but if you cannot handle that, and it is hard, it is very, very hard to take constructive criticism, especially when it's something you feel passionate about. But that's part of being an author. You have to be open to the fact that, that your editors are going to turn and go, actually, this would work better if you did this. And if you can't handle that, you shouldn't be in the industry. And the galling thing to me is, just going back to the industry and everything else, at the time, Anne Rice was getting offered $12,000 in advance for these books. In today's numbers, that is $63,700 and something.
Fucking hell.
Authors can't even get that now unless they're already a big name publisher. A lot of us are still being offered 12 grand as advances. And I'm going, this Anne Rice did not deserve the money she was getting for a lot. Fair dues if she sells them and she gets the royalties. But the advances she was getting for things that she was able to turn around and say, I don't want an editor, that is insane. It is absolutely mind boggling. There should be no one that is that egotistical that is above an editor.
Reading down, and so there's the claiming of Sleeping Beauty, then there's Beauty's punishment, and then there's Beauty's release, and then apparently there's another one called Beauty's Kingdom, but that's got a really short blurb for some reason. But
that was published later on, and it was Anne Rice attempting to redeem her problematic themes.
You can tell by the third one, Beauty's release, that the actual quality of the story is dipped massively.
It's dipped, and it shouldn't be possible because it's already falling off a cliff by the first one. But it's like finding out that hell has a basement. It's just like how do you get so far down that you're beneath bedrock? But it bugs me. Like I don't even care about I got a comment from during the week was it just seems to me like you're shaming people's kinks. I am the most pro kink. Do what you want as long as you're not hurting people, as long as it's legal, whatever. My objection to is the fact that it's shitty and it did not deserve the acclaim it got. And it's the kind of it bugs me. It bugs me because I know now what people are up against in the industry are, and I know that the wages being offered haven't changed. And it's you should not be able to ever turn around and say I am refusing to take constructive criticism from my publisher or from my editor. There is no one who is above that. It's mind-boggling to me that people are big enough that that they are popular enough that they can do that. Which also leads us into the other author we're going to talk about today and why she's able to put out the monstrosities that she does.
We are gonna. I'm sorry, I'm choking like fuck over here. Jesus. I've done that thing again where I've drank water and fucked it. There we go. Right. Yeah, I mean, let's reel ourselves back out from the literal abyss of really bad erotica. Because it really does look like editors didn't really touch anything in J.K. Rowling's new book.
They've not touched anything for a long time of any of her stuff.
But I mean, some of the stuff I've seen on Twitter has been horrendous. Like the fact that she's obviously went and written like a self-insert story about being hounded on Twitter for being transphobic and just generally awful is really quite embarrassing. Like some of the I was going through it earlier in the week when we were talking about it on stream, and one of the things is that there's pages and pages and pages and pages of this book that is formatted into entirely fictional tweets that she has written herself. And it's proper formatted like their tweets as well. And the detective in the book sits and reads them. And that's the plot. He's going through tweet after tweet and putting together threads. And I can tell you, all of you are already fucking bored, right? But
the numbers dipped by 10 just as soon as we started talking about J.K.
Rowling. But basically what it's the laziest fucking thing. Obviously she's looked at some of the stuff that she receives on Twitter. All of the tweets that she writes are in that kind of I'm not saying that everyone's spelling and grammar on the internet's flawless, but it's too misspelled. It's too the people who have tweeted at the protagonist are clumsy and dumb and they cannot type. They're spelling words like suicide wrong and stuff like that, and it's they're swapping letters around, and there's tons of things like that. And of course, not just building out the tweets and writing all these fake tweets, she's also writing fake profiles and fake biographies. So one of the antagonists in the book so-called antagonist is someone who, is a spoonie, as in follows spoon theory and has a bit about spoon theory in her bio. And she's got fibromyalgia, and she's an evil person in this fucking book because she's attacking the author, and it's just written in such a horrible way. And I think quite a lot of people were for some reason, a lot of people have actually been shocked by this, though. As if, like, J.K. Rowling's work isn't riddled with really, really bad takes, hating on
it's really, to me,
every group.
It's also just she doesn't even bother to get it correct, because she references myalgic encephalitis, colloquially known as chronic fatigue syndrome, and she actually mislabels it as CF, which is cystic fibrosis.
Yeah.
Which is another serious and debilitating illness that can kill people. But she conflated the two and used it as a form of mockery, because CFS is often seen as like, yuppie flu.
Yeah.
Which I hate that term, because it usually comes. We see massive spikes of conditions like myalgic encephalitis, CFS, after massive variants of virus outbreaks. So the influenza, the swine flu and bird flu and everything else, you saw a massive spike in people with CFS diagnoses after that, because post-viral fatigue syndrome, as we are finding out from COVID, is very, very real. But unfortunately, the medical, I hate using the word industry, but it is in some cases, doesn't like that. The CDC has railed for decades against CFS being a real condition. That it was, for a very long time, it was considered on par with hysterics, and they are still resisting it. We can see them still resisting it with long COVID, and Rowling actually plays into that with the whole, well, this is just cringy. It is heavily implied in the book that people that use spoon theory and they have CFS or they have fibro or they have chronic pain disorders are attention seeking, because they are not real to her. We're compared to people that have lost limbs, as if to say, like, oh well, yeah, it's not like a real disability, you're not missing a limb. As someone with multiple genetic disabilities where my limbs are affected, my fluctuating invisible chronic illnesses are worse.
Yeah, I mean,
because I never know what I'm going to wake up with day to day, and it's very kind of.
It seemed like such a weird attack though, because like spoon theory is so fucking like harmless, right? As in, like, whether you actually subscribe to that, like, that theory or not, it is absolutely fucking harmless, and no one should get like attacked for it. It's literally just a way of conceptualizing how much energy like tasks take, right? So, right? Am I right in saying that? It's like, so it might be, walking to the shops might take up X amount of spoons. You've got a certain amount of spoons in the day. I've seen a similar one where it's talking about stove tops, and there's a limited gas supply, so you can only heat up certain amounts. Like, there's been so many variations of it. It's like, it's so fucking harmless as like a thing. It's not dangerous. It's not pushing. It just seems to be like a really just obvious way of kicking down a group of people.
I am surprised that she has not thrown her back out from how much she punches down. Like, I'm genuinely surprised that she's not physically injured herself with some of the reaches that she comes through.
Yeah.
And it's really disheartening to see the way people run with it on social media. It's really, really kind of, you see people that take it as validation for their shittiness.
Yeah, I mean, like, one of the things that I saw, it was maybe like a week or two ago, and it was saying, like, J.K. Rowling took a year off social media. And it's like she was writing about it. I was like, fuck it, fucking when? Like, her, like, I think the longest she's gone recently has been a 3-month stint. And that was it. And even then, she was still liking and retweeting stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it's like she's not had a break at all. What the fuck? But yeah, that was another one that I just thought was like, it's funny. But on I think it was during the power washing stream that we had earlier in the week, we were talking about this, and of course the conversation got to Harry Potter, and it's like, we were talking about how J.K. Rowling like could have really just existed as this kind of beloved children's author, right? She could
You could
have.
have coasted on
She
that for the
she
rest of her
she
life.
she could have. She didn't really need to write anything after Harry Potter, and of course, I'm not going to say that she shouldn't have started writing anything else. But you know, as as she tried to become a bit of a Twitter personality, as she became more transphobic, of course, people are going to start to look at her work in a different light. Like, imagine if she had just coasted off Harry Potter, it probably would have been analysed in some way, the bit about, obviously Dobby and the slavery and, like the portrayal
Yeah.
of goblins and all this. It would have been analysed a bit. Like, she feels like she's being maliciously over-analysed now after all of the books have been
You
published.
do not
But
get to be a cultural phenomenon without opening yourself up to that level of criticism, though.
I also don't think you can really espouse a bunch of right wing stuff and avoid people reading into your previous work as well.
Yep.
Like it's one of those things that she, like I said, if she just not said anything, right, and like hadn't embarked on the whole transphobia side of things, like people wouldn't have actually aggressively analyzed a lot of the Harry
A lot
Potter
of it
stuff.
would have flown under the radar. A lot of people
Yeah,
wouldn't have been aware of it.
but I mean, a lot of the
Yeah.
Harry Potter interpretation now that's come out, and this is another thing we were talking about, is that like Harry Potter is now got a kind of time limit on it, because you're gonna get like, for example, me and Jessica have talked about this. It's like we're not gonna ban our future kids from reading Harry Potter. They can do it if they want, but we're not gonna we're not gonna read it to them. You know,
Yeah.
we'll read Terry Pratchett. We'll do something else. And I think
Tamora Pierce.
like
You
there's
need to get them to read Tamora Pierce.
don't worry, my future kids who don't exist. I'll make sure that Tomorrow Pierce is on the reading list. I'll just, you know what? I'll do that. I'll get them to. I'll get you to prepare a list.
I can do that. I've been building one for the minute I found out I was going to be an auntie, I've been building lists of things so that I can turn around and go, here is literally every other author that is better than J.K. Rowling that involves fantasy magical schools in some way.
Yeah, but I mean,
So
like, do you know what I mean though? I mean, there's going to be so many people who are, my age, I'd say our generation. I know there's a bit of a gap, but our generation and all the
we're
younger
the same
generations.
generation. We're just at
Yeah,
the different ends of
tail ends
it.
of it. Yeah, it's like there's going to be so many of them that just aren't gonna actually like bother because there's other stuff.
Yeah.
So like I'm not saying that Harry Potter obviously doesn't have widespread appeal. They're still making those fucking fantastic beast movies, or they're maybe not now. I don't know, but like that's got a shelf life now.
Yeah, it does.
And like Harry Potter won't like it could have maybe stood the test of time for at least a good wee while. I think it's really been cut down the past couple of years at least.
Yeah, it's definitely made it short. And there was a lot of people that would have just, they wouldn't have analysed it too closely. It would have just been a fun kids' book that they remember fondly from their own childhood. It would have stayed part of a huge mainstream thing for a lot of people. And now there's a lot of people going, actually, I don't want a pro fascist author's work in my house. I don't. And it's difficult because I I was, I think, 10, 11 when the first book came out, and there is no way to describe the actual phenomenon that it caused.
I
And
remember
it
fucking
bugs,
queuing for the books,
yeah.
like on
But
release night,
yeah,
midnight
I,
releases and
I,
stuff.
I was one of them because it was the Waterstones on Sucky Hall Street. They had a huge event, and my dad actually drove me there at 5 in the morning to get in line for a queue. I can't remember which book it was,
Yeah.
but my parents were just so happy. I was always I was always reading as a kid, but my parents were so happy because my friends were also reading, so I was no longer the lone weird book kid. I actually had
Yeah, yeah.
friends that were also reading, and it was it was a really good thing for a lot of people, and it's just been trashed. Like
Yeah.
it was. If you read it closely, you're already seeing the problematic content. As an adult, I read it and I go, Harry Potter
Yeah.
was a war criminal. But it's that as a kid, you don't notice these things,
Yeah.
and then unfortunately. her audience has grown up and we've all gone, that wasn't as good as I remember. But I think a lot of people would have been fine to let that go and just go, well, there's lots of problematic content that exists. I mean, Tamara
Yeah,
Pierce has certain topics that I would now go, but it's also a product of its time. It's not actively hateful, however, which is
yeah,
what J.K. Rowling's work has become.
yeah. I think it's I think it was one of those things like J.K. Rowling. I don't think maliciously set out to write any of Harry Potter like that.
She was just
Like
bad. She was
it's
just
like
someone that wasn't getting the same guidance she should have been from sensitivity readers.
I mean
That was a
it's
big
just
thing.
it's also just a general ignorance thing.
Yeah.
I mean I think one of the things that I find really interesting is how much she fucking despises her fans and people who actually read her book, because like you've got fans that love the book so much they started to point out loopholes because they were the ones that they were the ones that did analyze it to death. And you
Hmm.
had people going, I think it was in like the fourth book after the Goblet of Fire was released and after a kid literally fucking dies. um there's no time turner from the third book in it, and
Yeah.
like the retaliation to being told what happened to the time turners was the fifth book, I'm going to destroy all the fucking time turners, because when they're in the Ministry of Magic, Neville hits like a shelf and all of the time turners in the world get destroyed. And it like I find that fascinating. It's like, why do you have such disdain for your readers that point out your poor planning?
Yeah. She's a very reactionary author. She's also
Yeah.
someone that reacts very strongly. And again, I have RSD, which is rejection sensitivity disorder. Try and say that with a speech impediment. Um, as part of my ADHD. So I understand that there are times when, if you're hearing things like, oh, there's a plot hole here and there's a plot hole there, it can feel as if, it can, feel like you're being told you failed, you are worthless and
Yeah.
everything else. That's not what she was being told, but also she had the resources of huge publishers behind her. She had, why weren't the publishers
Editors.
putting editors and everything else? Why was no one allowed to say, actually, we can change this and make it better if we do XYZ? Well, she was making enough money that no one was allowed to question her genius. But it wasn't genius, it was mediocre stuff that needed more research than a cursory glance at Wikipedia. you
Yeah.
know and it bugs me that there are a lot of smaller authors, and even a lot of new authors and everything else. They're putting out so much more effort into things, and they're making things as airtight as they can. But nothing is ever going to be perfect, because it's impossible to create a perfection that will never be problematic to someone, or it won't irk somebody, or there'll always be room for improvement with things, but you'll never create perfection. So to turn around and say my stuff doesn't need edited because it earns enough money is just arrogance. It's just
Mm.
arrogance.
No, I mean, it's I feel like you could talk about this for fucking ages, but
I
really,
could.
my biggest worry is that the new book's gonna get hate read. I've really only seen it from screenshots, and the screenshots that I've seen haven't been very impressive from a general writing vibe. Um,
She's not progressed beyond she. This is not shade to young adult authors, but she has not progressed beyond the capability of writing for children. And that is no shade. There is specific skill that goes with writing for children, and some authors are really well suited for it. But when you are branching out into different genres and different ages, you have to adjust your style, and you have to have that capability.
yeah.
And not everyone has that capability. I do not have the capability of writing, certain stories, because I don't have the skill. I also don't have the inclination to learn it.
Yeah.
Um, but you cannot just continue the same style and way that you've been writing when you jump from children's books into crime. That's not how this works.
Yeah.
Um,
One of the
and yeah,
Sorry. Like one, no, I was just thinking it's interesting that obviously she tries to do more of her adult stuff under the Robert Galbraith name. Um,
under a man's
but
name, which I
but
find interesting for such a strong feminist.
yeah, but
Feminist.
I find that bit interesting. But there's also just the like it was such a marketing thing that before the first Robert Galbraith book was published, it was announced that it was J.K. Rowling under a pen name. And it's like, at what point should she just stop using the pen name? Like, what's that doing? Like, you know, so the J.K. Rowling brand, is that just Harry Potter then? Is she written anything else under J.K. Rowling?
It's probably to do with licensing. It's probably to do with the way it's been trademarked and everything else. It's possible she trademarked her name as well, and that the trademark is part of the Harry Potter franchise, because that is a thing that some people do as well.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know.
It's just like, why continue using the Robert Galbraith name when it's very, very well known that it was J.K. Rowling, and was before she wrote Casual Vacancy under J.K. Rowling? Was that the one with the very bad council house take thing?
Yes.
Yeah. It was. Yeah.
Yeah. There's nothing. There's never been anything good. It's
there's
a lot of
Like, I mean, it's funny because you can analyze Harry Potter through a kind of political lens, but it's very much J.K. Rowling's politics, and Casual Vacancy is just also J.K. Rowling's politics, and it's almost like there's nothing ever wrong with the actual system. It's just who's managing it, and she gets a wee bit of a tiff in that. And there's a really good video out there by Sean, on Harry Potter specifically, and he makes that point, and it's just like, because everyone's seen the 4chan like green text stuff, like why Harry Potter sucks, and it's like nothing changes in the world. Harry Potter's like wants to basically become a wizard cop. He wants to uphold the status quo. He never questions the authority of the Ministry of Magic, and it's just funny that you can also see it in our attempt to write more adult based stuff. Is that like there's nothing.
Someone that very much believes in, as you say, maintaining the status quo, and there's no problem with it. It just depends on who's in charge, and as long as it's her people that are in charge, it's fine.
Yeah.
And there's people that are going to be in the chat going, "Oh my," like. For some people, you can say, "Well, yes, it's fine as long as people like me are in charge," but for other people, that could be a fucking nightmare. And for many of us, to have someone like J.K. Rowling in charge is a fucking nightmare. It's it's a weird kind of centralist. Nothing needs to change. Everything's fine. We just need to moderate who is in charge. And it's like, well, sometimes to do that, you have to change the system, because the system is broken and the system enables more of the same people to keep coming up, which is exactly what happens in her books. But it's like almost like, oh, well, yeah, it works for me because it's almost like laziness, because it lets her create more content of the same thing, because the system never changes. I mean, she gets to regurgitate the same thing over and over and over again. But it's an interesting one for me as someone who is very much throwing the baby out with the bathwater followed by the bath. Like, that's my view of a lot of fiction, is I would rather just yeet everything and burn it down and start over again. So it's really quite, from an author perspective, I'm kind of going, A, it's laziness, and also B, it's just not good writing. Fiction should be on, sometimes fiction can be comforting, and that's fine, but a lot of really good fiction makes you think about things. It challenges the way you think about things. It can then also give you a little soothing pat on the head and go, that's okay, you don't have to have the revolution, but you should be thinking these thoughts.
Yeah.
And it's really mind-boggling that someone can write about this huge epic fight against good and evil, and they come down to, but the system that enabled the evil to rise is still, it's still a good system. We shouldn't rock the boat too much. We'll just we'll keep an eye on the evil and make sure it doesn't happen again. And I think, though it's
I mean, I think that's one of the things that's coming up with this fucking Harry Potter game that's coming out.
Yes.
That it's gonna sell well. There's no doubt about it. And like, unfortunately, the hype is there, because there's lots and lots of people out there who've been desperate for like a Harry Potter RPG for fucking ages. Doesn't matter what the devs have said. Doesn't matter that the devs have been a wee bit right wing. There's like a whole bunch of stuff that's sorry, I'm getting feedback that apparently we've got a thing with fucking audio again, and it seems like I turn my dial like really loud, or I turn it and I suddenly completely drop off. But yeah, there's definitely been a lot of discussion around it. The fact that you're playing a wizard that's like fighting the goblins during a rebellion against the ministry because the ministry treats goblins like second class citizens, it's like, I don't know. I feel like it'll no doubt sell well because everyone wants to, pick their house and do all that stuff. I don't want to do that because I am now 25 years old. And don't need to do that anymore. But yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting when we're talking about how, like, writing. There's like writing that kind of challenges you a wee bit, and I'm trying to think of like a TV show that's made me like actually think about the way, like, I think. Like, I'm trying. We were talking about Lord of the Rings beforehand, and yes, I am 25. Everyone in chat, yes, I'm 25. How old do you fucking think I was? There's so many people. I mean, to be honest, see, back in 2015, people thought I was 40 and on Tumblr. I was like, damn, fucking hell. Franavu, you're saying that the Harry Potter game's already coming up as a top seller on Steam. Yeah, I mean, a bunch of people will be pre-ordering it. I'm just not gonna hate play it. I'm not gonna like hate watch. And this is back to what we were talking about with the new Lord of the Rings series. Like, there's a bunch of people hate watching the Lord of the Rings series at the moment, and I think some of it will be from like a genuine, like, I want to critically analyze this from a should this have been made in Lord of the Rings lore perspective. But you've also got people who are just railing against like diversity. Oh God, there's a woman in the cast. Jesus, we can't have that. Yeah. I thought it was not too bad, the 2 episodes I saw. I thought I was concerned that it was actually gonna look shit.
From the screenshots I'd seen, I was like, oh my God, you can see the line of their wigs. Like, that was my big concern for a lot of it as well.
It's not it's not terrible. It's really not that bad. From the first 2 episodes, it hasn't been atrocious. There's been a couple of things that I've kind of went a wee bit like, sorry, I'm just watching a cat might try and jump out the window. Ah, you fucking cunt. Why would you do
time
that?
to rescue Phelan.
Sorry.
It's funny for all of you because I'm hearing this 5-10 seconds before all of you are seeing what is happening, so I'm trying not to react to I jumping off screen.
Sorry, I saw him do it. He was standing up. I had my window slightly open, and he fucking decided to jump for it. The little bastard. It's all good. We're fine. I had to wrestle my cat away from the window. It's like, what do you want out there? There's nothing. It's all good. The accents really put you off. I'm guessing we're still talking about Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
Right, okay. Yeah, I mean, there's this weird pivot that's happened, and I know that it probably stems from Gimli, but they're trying to make all the dwarves are Scottish now. And that never used to be the thing. I don't necessarily mind it being the thing, but it's like all the dwarves are Scottish, and you can very much hear when the accent goes and when they're struggling, and it's like, it's not good. It's like the cast are admirable. They try, but like, why? Why do you?
It's not diversity if you're putting people into stereotypical boxes for certain things, and there's a lot of stereotyping that is happening with the association with the accents.
Yeah,
and that's not okay.
Yeah, one of the things that I thought was quite interesting. So there's a race that are they're like the Harfoots or something like that, and they are the ancestral like traveler race that settle and become hobbits in the Shire in it.
Yeah.
And it's very like, oh, can like, so like I don't want to spoil too much, but like someone breaks their leg and then like there's I just will he be able to migrate? It's just like put him in a cart, fucking.
Which is what was
Which is
traditionally always done. They just shoved you in the back of the cart and
yeah.
yeah.
But yeah. So there's a bit of that. So there's a full on race and culture as the Harfoots, and they are the pre-Hobbit, in it, which is kind of like interesting, like because as far as I'm aware, they like Amazon don't have the right to the Silmarillion. So they don't have any of that, so they can't build off that. They can only reference it. So this is between the Silmarillion and the Hobbit. I'm saying the Hobbit. I doubt the series will end and then the Hobbit will start. I'm just like it's between that gap. It's still the second age. The third age hasn't started yet. Like looking off IMDb, so this isn't spoilers. You've got Numenorians in it. You've got a Isildur in it. It's like a Isildur's been cast and it's on IMDb, to the point where if you're watching it via Amazon Prime, it actually has it has like a character fact sheet, and it's got a character fact sheet about Isildur. So they're not hiding it. It's not like a big reveal.
Yeah.
As far as I'm aware, they've got the rights to the appendices for Lord of the Rings. They don't have it for the Silmarillion. Is that correct?
That's what I read on Twitter, because that's where I get all of my stuff about the Lord of the Rings from at the minute. Is Twitter.
See, I'm a giant Lord of the Rings fan. I absolutely
So
love
am I.
Lord of the Rings. It's just like there was just something weird about like Amazon being made. And to be fair, Bear McCreary has done a very good job on the music front. That's one thing I will absolutely commend him for. Bear McCreary's done some really good stuff on the music, and it does have that Howard Shore, like, almost. It's got the vibe.
Swelling music and
and to like, I quite like the way that they're doing it as well. You're still jumping between different characters, which I think is quite good. I feel like if we were just following one story, it would be a wee bit more naff. But you've got people in the south. You've basically got pre-Gondor. You've got the elves who are like basically a bunch of them are beginning to fuck off back to Valinor, and then you've got the Harfoots, and I'm probably missing another one, but you've kind of got all the components, and you've got the dwarves. To be honest, I actually thought they did not a too bad job. Like, again, spoilers. They go to Moria. They go to Khazad-dûm. Before the goblins fucked it, and it looks impressive. Like it looks good. I'd say it definitely they took inspiration from like Peter Jackson's representation of the Lonely Mountain, and I think it works. Orc makeup's great, actually. That's another thing. So it's not CGI, which is incredible.
I expected the whole thing to be CGI, which with the whole fiasco of She-Hulk that's been the last couple of weeks is. I'm glad that it's not just CGI.
I feel fucking sorry for anyone on the visual effects team of like the She-Hulk and stuff like that, because it is getting ripped to shit. There was one I saw where like she walked into her office and someone compared it to a GTA 5 cutscene, and like it was such a good comparison though, because it was like like arms out here, and it was like walking into her office, and it was like atrocious. And then obviously there's the scene where She-Hulk's been twerking with Megan Thee Stallion or whatever her name is, and it's like some poor visual effects person was kept away from their family and made to work overtime on that piece of shit,
Yeah. Rather than just give her a good wig and prosthetics.
Yeah. So hopefully visual effects unionize at some point. That would be wonderful.
It would be.
Because if there's one industry that needs it, it's gaming, all things gaming and visual effects. Because it's funny because obviously the Writers Guild, like you can still watching old TV series, you still see the impact that it had on all TV shows when the writer's strike happened. Which I think was that not like 2007 or something like that? Was it later?
Yes.
So
I thought 2008, but yeah.
maybe 2008, but it's like, you can see the ripple effect that had, because that's when you got like all of the really shit episodes, like the Breaking Bad one with the fly in it.
Yes.
And you can just tell it was like, basically it was whenever like if you encounter a flashback episode from one of the series that was on during that time, chances are it was a writer's strike one. I think The Office America did one. There was a whole. I think the Supernatural was hit by it.
Yeah, they were all hit by it pretty phenomenally, from what I remember. But yeah, it really showed you the amount of work that went into things.
Yeah.
And as soon as that happened, it was everything's falling apart. And it's like, well, no, you can't just rely on shiny graphics to get you through.
Well, imagine if visual effects studios, like the ones that like Disney fucking hire to do all their stuff, imagine if they went, tools down for 6 months, or like tools down for 1 month. It would be a disaster. That was actually.
We got DSTL as direct consequence of writer's strike.
Well, yeah, no, I think I watched a video on that recently, and I've never seen Supernatural, and I know that's like blasphemy on Tumblr because everyone's seen Supernatural. I watched maybe about 20 minutes of the Doctor Who with Benedict Cumberbatch. I think that was shite as well, and I stopped watching Doctor Who the moment David Tennant left. So.
You mean Matt Smith, not Benedict Cumberbatch? Although I see the confusion with the, yeah.
Wait, what?
But, you said Benedict Cumberbatch. It's not. He wasn't Doctor Who. That was Matt Smith.
No, did I say Doctor Who? Did I say Sherlock? I meant Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock.
You meant Sherlock. Okay. Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
Sorry. Sorry. It was
the worst timeline.
Yeah.
Benedict Cumberbatch is in Doctor Who.
No, sorry. I was getting ahead of myself there. No, I meant so yeah, I watched the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock for about 20 minutes and I stopped it, and then I stopped watching Doctor Who when Matt Smith came to be. I watched a couple of Matt Smith ones, but the moment they tried to do they did the Weeping Angels, which was really, really good, and like Blink was a great episode, but then you had Let's Put the Weeping Angels with Matt Smith, and they made it like a military thing.
Yeah.
And it was bad.
I just don't like what's his face.
Stephen Moffat.
I actually have a story about him, but he's good at one-off episodes. But as soon as he is made into the main show, as soon as he's made into the showrunner, it is catastrophic. Like if you watch Stephen Moffat's Dracula, it is probably the worst reinterpretation of Dracula I have ever seen. And there's a lot of Dracula movies that exist in TV shows. But yeah, Stephen, if we want a fun personal anecdote, my wedding was, we had TARDISes everywhere because both Mothman and I were huge Doctor Who fans, both original and new. So we had a lot of, we had a TARDIS on top of our wedding cake. We had some other stuff as well. My bridesmaids were wearing TARDIS blue. We also had other fandoms. We had Batman, we had Terry Pratchett, we had a bunch of other stuff. It was done kind of tastefully, so it wasn't in your face, but people who knew the references were like, oh yeah, there's a wee thing. But anyway, a couple of years later, I was working for the University of Glasgow, and Stephen Moffat was being awarded an honorary doctorate, and we were supposed to be we were catering that event. And I was not placed with him, but my co-worker knew that I really liked Doctor Who. So she was showing him all my wedding pictures on Facebook and everything else, and she got his autograph for me. and on his autograph, he wrote, to Joy, whatever, blah blah blah, and then his comment underneath was a very leery, "What gorgeous bridesmaids," and it was just a little bit weird because some of the bridesmaids were maybe 17, 18 at the time. So it was that kind of like, why are you staring at the very obviously young bridesmaids? Like, why? It was just a thing where it was, it could have just been a nice little interaction where, oh yeah, I'll sign a thing for you and that's it. But it was made into a very kind of like,
you've looked way too much at these pictures.
Yes, you've taken my friend's phone at this event and you have been scrolling through the bridesmaids and pausing on them enough that you felt it was okay to say to the bride, "What gorgeous bridesmaids." So it was just awkward. It was very uncomfortable, and you could tell his wife was hungry, apparently. So it was one of those things where I got handed this autograph, and I was looking at my coworker like, thanks. That's. It was really thoughtful of her, but unfortunately, he ruined it by being Stephen Moffat. That was unfortunate. That was it. It made me kind of like everything he was involved with after that. I was kind of side eyeing it, and I was like, yeah, I'm glad my gut instinct was right because it just felt uncomfortable the whole time.
I blame Stephen Moffat for starting like a really really shit trend in a lot of TV shows. That I can imagine, like, I think The Walking Dead's a really good example of it, but like Stephen Moffat, like, couldn't have any interesting things happen in the episodes between the first in the series and the finale. So there was, like, I don't mind the Monster of the Week formula. Like, I really don't mind it. I think it can be quite interesting. I think it can be particularly interesting when there's a decent arc that kind of covers the full, like, maybe ties all the episodes together. But
bearing in mind, Doctor Who was preliminary for children.
Yeah,
for a very young audience, and Monster of the Week works very well for younger audiences.
Yeah, I mean, like, think of all the cartoons and stuff like that as well that like we watched growing up, like Scooby Doo. You didn't need the Scooby Doo arc. I would totally watch a Scooby Doo arc now though.
I would.
But like one of the things like Walking Dead is the biggest example. I mean, I don't know what it is about The Walking Dead. I would love to get into The Walking Dead. And I did. I watched it religiously up until about season 6, and then I was like, there was always the hint that it would be good at some point. There was just enough that it would like be an interesting thing, but fuck me, it just never ever performed.
It never delivered on it very well.
It never delivered.
It was the point where the tension would be really good, and then you have to give payoff for that tension.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times the payoff was not satisfactory.
Yeah, I mean, like, so, like, Walking Dead Season 1 was good, right? 6 episodes. Walking Dead Season 2, I don't know how many fucking episodes, but there was tons, and they were on the farm for fucking ages, which is fine, because there was quite a lot of things happening, but, like, long enough that it was like, okay, that is The Walking Dead Season 2 done. Then it was the prison, and fuck me, they could not deliver on the prison. It was like they had too many spinning plates, and they did not know how to drop them. Like, they had the stuff that was happening in the prison, then there was Andrea in the town, the Woodbury town, and then the governor and all that, and then, like, they couldn't, like, they did a full season where the jail in Woodbury like interacted, the prison in Woodbury interacted, and then they continued that into season 4, and then like the thing with how that show was made though, that it was always a start of a season, mid-season finale, mid-season start, end of the season finale. So all of the all of the interesting plot stuff would happen either the first episode in the half season or the end, and everything else in the middle was fucking filler. And it used to frustrate the shit out of me, and it's why I eventually stopped watching. I got to the point where Negan was in it, and then I was like, this is just not going
I
anywhere.
think I even got that far. I'm trying to remember how far I watched, and it wasn't that far because it was just very repetitive.
Yeah.
And although repetition's good in some cases, it only works for certain genres. And when you have a show like The Walking Dead, which relies so much on tension, the repetition just detracts from the tension. You know, you no longer give a shit who survives because there's always going to be a new character to replace them. So it's a never ending. I think the Walking season would have benefited from being a lot shorter.
Yeah.
Puny Humans, I still pine for Farscape. I miss Farscape.
What was Farscape?
There's gonna be a lot. I was gonna say there's gonna be a lot of young people in chat going, "What's Farscape?" Farscape was a really.
I am that young person.
A really fun space sci-fi adventure where this American astronaut dude goes through a wormhole and finds himself in a universe, an alternate timeline with aliens and stuff, and it's this whole.
I'm looking it up.
It's fun. It's really campy sci-fi fun.
I was 3 years old when that came out, Joy.
Oh, I'm gonna turn to dust in a second. But yeah, it's the Farscape. If you like kind of the campy sci-fi stuff, and you also like things that have a fairly decent story narrative arc, Farscape's a good shout. If you're looking for something cheesy to kind of binge, stop actually taking psychic damage here. I'm always every time I do this podcast, I'm aware of my advancing age with every week.
You give me ADHD symptoms, and I remind you of aging. That's it.
I don't give you symptoms; I point them out. Yeah, the Farscape's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed Farscape when I was younger, and to me, it still holds up. I used to watch Farscape whenever I was watching Star Trek stuff. And it's completely different. But I really enjoyed, the fact that the pilot of the ship is like bonded to the ship, like it's like a tentacle creature, and it controls the ship and things like that. And there's this whole evil faction that needs to get taken down. But it also does the kind of like the light relief filler episodes where you literally see the bad guy wearing like a Hawaiian shirt and like shorts and stuff. Like it's really. Yeah, there's also Muppets in it. There's like the animatronic style kind of aliens, which I really love as well.
Okay.
And yeah, there's lots of things to recommend. I can't remember all of it, but I do remember enjoying it a lot. And I watched it a couple of years ago, and to me it still held up. So I really enjoyed it, and it was a good way of showing how they knew when to end that series. I think it maybe went on for maybe a little bit, like maybe a couple of episodes. I would have ended it sooner, but they wanted to wrap everything up.
Sorry, I've just read. Sorry, I was just reading Panicorn's comment there, talking about feeling old. Apparently, a live-action Tangled is coming out next year. No, you can't have that.
We don't need it.
That was actually something that I watched a video on the other day. It was talking about how the live-action Mulan. Why it doesn't work, and I know that there's lots of commentary around that film in general, but like there's no growth in Mulan's character in it, because she doesn't start off as there's no comparison to what she was like at the start.
Yeah, and
then there's because she can batter folk from the very beginning of the film. There's obviously there's the scenes in the original where she obviously goes to the matchmaker, and that's a bit of a disaster, and there's all this kind of push back against her femininity, and then she has to be more masculine when she goes and joins the training camp, and then it's actually her femininity that wins the day. How she approaches the problems when they're attacking the kind of castle in I think in Beijing, or Xi'an or wherever it is, but there's just none of that in the thing. Yeah, femininity. Are you happy now? Are you happy that I can pronounce words? Am I gonna get corrected every fucking stream? But no, it's interesting how a lot of the live action films really do. Really, because I think Disney actually does have a problem with trying to correct things that have been commented on, because the the Aladdin film as well, the one that had Will Smith in it. Like it's Jasmine in
It's
it.
unfortunate, yeah.
Well, Jasmine in it wants to be Sultan, because like gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss. Like
Yeah, which is a very modern Disney thing, is the
yeah.
gaslight gatekeeper, and it's also the rejection of, oh well, the reason people hate us is because all of our heroines only existed to be romantic interests. Therefore, we will give them badassery, and it's like you don't have to do that. You can just give them autonomy. Like it's not, you don't have to eradicate, you know, things that are very, valid and very, it bugs me especially when there's a lot of like in fantasy novels. It's like I'm not like other girls. I hate embroidery. I hate these things. I'm going, well, cool. Who's making your socks? Who's making your sails? Who's women's work has always been important work. And the fact that is undermined is the problem. You don't have to be like, well, I reject these things. I'm going to do these other things. You could literally just give more credit to the skills required to do these things.
No, that's very fair. Puny Humans says a good point here. I wonder if there is a single live action adaptation better than the animated original.
No.
Nah. And
I literally cannot think of anything.
the thing is that animation lends itself to so much more like visually striking scenes. I mean, like I would hate it if they tried to do like a Spider-Man. I mean, I suppose Spider-Man 3, not the Tobey Maguire ones, the one that just came out, one that has home in the title.
Yeah.
Like I know that was the kind of trying to do the Into the Spider-Verse thing, but like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is the best Spider-Man film. It is like I remember watching that animated film and just being amazed at the colors. There's one specific scene in Into the Spider-Verse where like the subway has been like spray painted and it is like the best looking fucking like modern animation. I was like, imagine if all of I mean obviously a lot of people wouldn't want the whole of the Marvel Cinematic Universe to be animated, but like imagine how much cooler all of the fucking scenes would look like rather than like endless like beige and grey in like Civil War. I mean some of the fight scenes in some of the MCU stuff look fucking atrocious, and that kind of lends itself back to the visual effects folk with She-Hulk. Like the fights in like Shang-Chi and stuff. I mean I haven't seen I've seen the fights and it's like damn, they look bad.
I'm just reading all the comments, but yeah, it's that kind of. There's some things that don't need to be remade, and the reason Disney is remaking a lot of things is because they're maintaining the copyright.
Yep.
That's why they're doing it. They're not doing it because it needs to be. It's not a fun new creative venture. It's literally just Disney maintaining their copyright, which I don't think a lot of people realize. The fact Winnie the Pooh is now technically public domain.
Yes.
Not Winnie the Pooh. Not Winnie the Pooh with his red jumper is still belong to Disney. So you cannot make any Winnie the Pooh things with the red jumper, but you can make other things.
Have you seen the horror film that's coming out?
No.
Oh my god, you've got to look this up. It is the fucking amazing. So it's called Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey. It's a horror slasher film with Winnie the Pooh and Piglet. It's amazing. It is gonna be the fucking best thing ever. I cannot wait for it. There's a trailer out. There was a trailer released 4 days ago. It is gonna be incredible.
He can't wear a red shirt, but he can wear a coating of blood.
It follows Pooh and Piglet as they go on a rampage after Christopher Robin abandons them for college. That is the fucking best. That is the best. I feel like I hope I don't know what the release date actually is. We'll need to check, but like we should totally have like a watch party or something.
We should.
Like we should watch that for our Spooktober. I'm not sure if it's coming out this.
I'm finding it from the comments that there's a lot of Winnie the Pooh content I was not aware of that I will need to check out, because I did love Winnie the Pooh. I loved the originals as a kid, so.
I remember watching the original animation, and there's a bit where they're all going on a search for Christopher Robin, and they go through like a kind of haunted forest, and they all get lost, and they all go in different branching paths. Scared the shit out of me as a kid. It's like, I think it kind of fed into this like weird sense of claustrophobia that I have. I'm not a claustrophobic person at all. I don't know what it is, but like there was something about that was claustrophobic, and it was
I think that was the thing a lot of the earlier animations did really well, because I remember as a kid being absolutely terrified of a lot of the kind of the villain scenes. Like Snow White running through the forest was petrifying to me as a child. Yeah. Not just because I grew up in a forest town, like, but because like you were like, yeah, I could totally see the fact that you'd be running through a forest, and yes, that would look like a monster, like the tree with the owl in it would look terrifying. And it's a lot of that was done really well, and you don't really get that anymore. A lot of it falls into the uncanny valley level of uncomfortable, but it's not scary, which is the issue I take with it.
I mean,
yeah.
No, it's just it's interesting. It's like going more into like horror. Like I don't enjoy watching horror films, right? Because I find that so many modern horror films rely entirely on jump scares. I think we're kind of coming to the end of that now, and there's definitely a lot more horror stuff out there that relies on building tension. But like there was like I'm trying to think of all the actual fucking films that I was dragged to when I was in high school, and I was trying to prove to myself and the girls and the guys that I was with, my friends, that I could also watch a scary movie. So was it Insidious was one of them, and like
I remember Insidious.
All of the shit in Insidious that is horror was just jump scares, and it was always like, I actually think you can get visually scary characters that don't actually get their time to shine, because whenever you see them, it's just a jump scare, and then the character starts running like immediately or closes their eyes or whatever it is. I actually thought the scariest horror film I've ever seen was a 12A, and it was fucking Daniel Radcliffe in Woman in Black.
Yes.
It was his first film after Harry Potter, and everyone was like, "Oh, it's a Daniel Radcliffe. Oh, let's go see me, Harry." And it was the most fucking terrifying film. It had a couple of jump scares in it, but it
did. And I was so annoyed at the ending, because the ending of that fell flat to me. But it had the makings of a really good horror setup. Yeah. Like the tension in that movie was good right up until it got to the third act, where I feel like they didn't know what to do anymore. But the build up to it was fabulous from a narrative standpoint. Also, Southern Orchid mentioning Crimson Peak. I adore Crimson Peak. I am also terrified of some of the visual effects, but I will watch Crimson Peak at least once every 6 months, because I need that gothic horror. I need it so much. Just inject it into my veins, because it is so beautiful and so rich, and the scenery and everything else really just plays into the complexity of the world and also the horror. It's fantastic.
I'll need to check that one out. I've not seen it at all.
We'll need to watch it. Well,
we're gonna watch party the fuck out.
Is this us announcing it? But for October, Mothman and I were going to be doing a bunch of scary movies and stuff. So we were also going to get you guys and
games
involved if you wanted to.
Yeah.
And games possibly. But we'll see. That's more I doing horror.
Yeah.
The Crimson Peak could definitely be on our watch list, because I adore Crimson Peak. It works so well for my gothic horror.
Tell you what, it's got some cast to it.
Oh, the cast is wonderful. I know some people think it's really cringe to still like Tom Hiddleston. I still love Tom Hiddleston. I am at an age where I can appreciate Tom Hiddleston without cringe.
Tom Hiddleston only became cringe because he took part in that fucking Chinese vitamin ad. Where he makes her breakfast, and it's just like,
I mean, there's some people who really enjoyed that fantasy, and that's fine. But
not kink shaming. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
It was a very cringe advert.
It was, there are things, but at the same time they have bills to pay.
Yeah.
But it's Crimson Peak is fabulous. Del Toro movies are fantastic for that. Pan's Labyrinth, I almost wet myself with terror the first time I watched Pan's Labyrinth.
Is that the eye guy?
The thing with the eyes.
Aye.
That, to me, was terrifying. More scary than any jump scare I've ever seen in my life. And I mean, when I was a teenager, when I was coming into my teens, Blair Witch was a thing, and that was all the rage. And I remember watching Blair Witch, and it was jump scary, but I didn't have nightmares about it. I had nightmares about Pan's Labyrinth as an adult. I still get them occasionally. I will have the thing where I get like flashes in my nightmares of the eye thing. For whatever reason, that bothered me on a much more deeper level than the idea of being chased through the woods by a witch. Like that just. Yeah, the real horror of Blair Witch was the shaky cam. That was what made Blair Witch revolutionary, was the shaky jump cam and everything else. And I think a lot of people tried to emulate that because it is a good cheap way of doing it.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily what you need for your story.
I
it's
mean,
not always the best way of doing it. And is Celosia 89? They're pointing at the elegance of Doug. I can't remember his last name. He does he's in What We Do in the Shadows as well. He's the Duke. He does all the elegant hand and fantastical stuff. He understands the movement of horror so well. He understands that it's it's about being otherworldly and having different mannerisms that make you seem abnormal, but also at the same time it's very elegant, which makes it more unsettling. So it's that Doug Jones, but it's. Yeah, there's so many good things that make horror work, and then there's so many other things that don't. And I think jump scares have had their time, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. Like one of the things that I'm finding has definitely moved into gaming horror. That is a wee bit tired, but like I feel like psychological horror in games is now. Is wearing a bit thin just because of the amount of stuff that's being pushed out about it. It's now like, because you can do kind of wacky things with physics in games, you can have like, you're walking down a corridor and then the door's locked and you turn round and then like the hall has changed and stuff. And I just think it's in a game it's wearing really thin. Like there's a lot of like, same with like the glitchy vision, glitchy HUD. I think like that's becoming quite. I'm not sure if it's just we're getting used to it, and it's more the exposure to that has now made it less terrifying. But I don't remember being like particularly scared by like Layers of Fear or anything like that. There's that one hilarious bit in Layers of Fear where like a child runs and smacks its head on like a cupboard and like falls back, and then it glitches and disappears. But that's more funny than anything. I don't know. Maybe I'm not as scared anymore. If anything, maybe I've just like surpassed what I'm only scared of heights now.
Everyone should go and watch I's mortuary assistant streams that he did.
Don't know what you're talking about. Nah, those didn't happen. Yeah, no. Again, that's jump scares. That's jump scares.
But I think it's well done in that game.
Yeah, it's mortuary assistant.
Tension adequately.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's absolutely fair. I think there's also the good thing about Mortuary Assistant actually is that there is so much happening as well. Like if it was just one monster, it would maybe wear a wee bit thin, but it's the fact that like you can turn around and you can see like the mimic, or you can see the woman in white, or you can see the Shadow Man, and you can see all of them. Like it's quite good like that because there's the variety, and then of course there's like. there's a bit where your granny's at the window just knocking.
That was so unsettling when I was watching that.
Yeah. And then like of course she's like, let me in, or you're not gonna open the window for your granny. And then
but you love me, dear. Don't you love me?
Don't you love me? Let me in, you little bitch. Is how like the voice kind of cuts to it. But like yeah, I mean to be honest, I think a game like that's good because it builds tension to the point where you should be scared in the scenes where you're not actually under any real threat.
The skill is making you afraid just by building out the tension.
Yeah.
It's literally the skill lies in making you create the horror yourself, and a
Yeah.
lot of people fail at that. And it's, you know, there's times when I will absolutely work myself up into a terror. Like I was playing a really old Might and Magic game over the weekend, and I forgot how scary it was. The Thief games were not necessarily horror games, but when they did horror levels, they were
Mm.
spectacular. And then you get to Thief 4 and you do the horror level, and it's not scary compared. I mean, it's scary, but it's more ableist than scary. Whereas the other ones, it was the horror levels were terrifying because it was so wild and so different from what you were. You know, you'd been playing a stealth game for the
Yeah.
last couple of hours, and then all of a sudden it's horror survival, and you're like, holy shit, this is not good. This is like and you're suddenly you abandon stealth because the only thing you can do is run for your life, and
Yeah,
that to
that's
me
cool.
works really well. And Thief 1, Thief 2, Thief 3. Thief 3 scared the bejesus out of me because it was in the same vein as the Weeping Angels. Like you turn around and the statues that were chased, you know, you wouldn't realize you were being chased at first, but then all of a
Mm.
sudden you'd realize that the statues were moving, and if you turned around, it would suddenly you'd look around and the statue would be there grasping you, and your thief character's like, "Fuck this!" And it's just, you know, it's a game that you're used to being slow with. It's a game that you crawl through and you're very slow and very careful, and all of a sudden you are required to abandon that and run. That to me is genius. That to me works really well.
Sorry, that is a really good
Yeah,
point from Pixelated Skies in chat. One of the scariest things that happened in my Watcher the Assistant playthrough was a glitch, right? Because I didn't know whether it was a glitch or whether it was deliberate in game.
yeah.
And it was when I couldn't pull the like the cart, the gurney. I couldn't pull the gurney at all. And it stopped, and I ran outside and I ran all the way around to try and get to the other side of the gurney and see if that was the problem. And then I ran back, and then the game like fixed itself. But it was like unbelievably creepy. And I think, you know, one of the points you were saying there is like it's about the horror you kind of create for yourself. I think, particularly with horror games, if the horror game successfully manages to like alter your behavior to the point where you're like nervous about doing the most basic of fucking tasks. Like I was always expecting something to be slightly different whenever I started the game and I was in like the room in the flat before you go to the morgue. Like I was expecting there to be something there. I was expecting there to be like something a wee bit different each
You're
time.
building the horror yourself. You
Yeah.
are building the anticipation yourself, which is the sign of a good built game that
Yeah.
knows its strengths. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
There was a game, an older game I don't remember the name of, but you know, it was one of the first ones that played with, you know, oh, it pretended to wipe your saves, it pretended to turn it. I can't remember the name of it. It's annoying me so much. But
yeah.
Mothman played it a lot, but it made it, you know, it looked as if, you know, your saves had been wiped and you had to start over again. Just
Mm,
kidding. That was part of the nightmare. You know, it was
yeah.
that kind of playing with unreality to a degree that had never been seen before. And now I feel like a lot of things do that as rote. So, yeah, it's interesting how it evolves.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it's I think
Eternal Darkness, yes, thank you, Judge Magistrate Ember.
this is why I really like indie games because I think in the same way that we were talking about publishing at the start, I love how all of our conversations are cyclical. It's great, but like we were talking about how like a lot of traditional publishing houses almost like smooth out all of the content. Like it's why indie game development's so interesting. Like so many good like obviously you've got like massive games this year like Elden Ring that have come out
Mm-hmm.
and they really have blown people away. But like you have some incredible indie stuff coming that could only really be made by an indie one because I feel like if they were made by a studio that was, you know, mid-sized or bigger, it would be like so sanitized that you wouldn't get that. As well as like, you know, you could have a mortuary assistant that had flawless graphics and ray tracing, and it probably wouldn't be scary. Like it
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be as scary. I feel like there's something quite powerful about having, like, you know, and there's a good one. Fall into Life Hades. AAA companies would never. I mean, yeah, exactly. Um, there's so much that indie studios can do with being small enough that they can adapt quite quickly. They can create really tense situations in like horror. Um, but yeah.
Yeah.
Right, well, I mean, to be honest, I actually think we can safely wrap up there because we're going to spend a wee bit 10 minutes at the end with the people who are actually in the stream with us. But we will wrap up the Ice Sphere episode 13 right there. We're not done on the stream side of things, but we'll call an end to it.
This is your incentive to come chat with us.
Yeah, exactly.
If you are listening to this is your incentive to come hang out
Yeah,
in the Twitch chat.
you get bonus content if you watch us live. But yeah, for now, I'll drop links to the YouTube where this will be archived. We also now have a Twitter and a Tumblr, and we'd love to see you in there as well. Particularly because as we grow this and get more involved on the interactive side, there might be questions and topics that you can send to us on Tumblr or whatever, and we can go on and do a wee bit more. But for now, well, it's probably a goodbye from me and Joy on the Ice Sphere front, and we can now go back to our wonderful streaming and chat to a bunch of you in chat.